Hello and welcome. My name is Kubeir. I am a CICC licensed immigration consultant and back live streaming to you from our office in North York, Toronto, Ontario. I'm very excited because I'm finally hosting my very good friend Stephen Meurrens again. For people who do not know, he is an immigration lawyer based out of Vancouver in BC and tweets a lot of information, a lot of A-tips, a lot of things that we would otherwise have not known from IRCC and I think he's a bit of a pain in the neck for IRCC because he asks so many questions of IRCC. But today we're going to have him here and discuss with him two main things, and those are going to be the main topics for today's discussion. First one, like what the hell's going on with the Express Entry? Like what's the hide and seek that IRCC is playing? And number two, what's going on with Bill C19? Both extremely important in the way how things are, raveling out for Canadian immigration. So without further delay, let's have Stephen here. Hi, Stephen. How are you? Welcome. Good morning.
Morning. You have more tweets than I do.
No, I have more tweets just sort of, trying to ruffle up IRCC to get some response from them. But you have something much more of substance.
That's a difficult game to get a response from IRCC.
So what's going on? How's the? Let's talk about the weather, as they would say. How's the weather down in BC? Is it all cool?
Sunny, warm and sunny.
I wish
we had a bit of snow last week, I guess, but actually more snow this winter than usual. But otherwise, we're back to it's probably 8 degrees today, 9 degrees.
Wow. We have about 0, but with the wind chill, it's not looking that comfortable. But the weather, how's the weather in the IRCC control rooms? What do you think? What's happening there?
In the IRCC control room, actually, well, we're going to talk about Express Entry because was there an ITA today? Before I say anything, I guess I should make
sure. As of now, there's
been one since January. I know there've been provincial ITA or provincial nominee program ITAs, a federal skilled worker only ITA, which is very weird. I don't think they've ever done that before. It's contrary to what I've said before on your show that I think it
would be a CEC
clearing out all CECs before they do federal skilled worker, and it makes me wonder why they did a federal skilled worker ITA. I know that they had issues with their November ITA for federal skilled workers, so maybe they're trying to make up for it. But I guess what you could say is going on with Express Entry are IT issues that first appeared, I think, back when they changed to the 2021 knock. And I think you've talked about it on your show or Twitter, where like people who should have gotten ITAs aren't getting ITAs. People who shouldn't have gotten ITAs were getting ITAs. Points were appearing that people shouldn't have gotten points.
Yeah.
And I think it has really thrown a bit of a wrench in Express Entry. Like, I actually think IT issues might be why there was not a CEC draw in all of like February.
But if they can conduct a PNP draw, if they can conduct an FSW draw, why can't they just conduct a regular all program draws, or for that matter, a CEC draw?
Well, the all program draw in November was what had the big IT issue, which was, I can't even remember the exact details. I think it was that there were people getting points for arranged employment who couldn't. Oh, I had clients who were only eligible for FSW and they got invited under the CEC. And so for those who don't know, the way Express Entry works is under the law, you have to meet the requirements of the program that you're invited under. So you can't say, well, I should have been FSW. They invited me under CEC. That's their problem. Technically, the law mandates that those applications be refused if you're invited under the wrong category. So the issues that they're having actually have big legislative consequences. And I wonder if that's part of why they haven't done a CEC draw is that they've been struggling with the IT of it.
All right, so there was a draw on the 9th of November. That was before the knock changes happened. Then on the 23rd, IRCC just went ahead and did a draw. I mean, I was quite skeptical they would do it, but they went ahead and did it. And of course, then lo and behold, they had all kinds of issues. They did come back and conduct a draw on the 11th and 18th, back to back. And they
did. I've had people contact me I didn't have any clients who had issues with those draws. I'd see on Twitter people talking about, again, people who should have been invited not getting invited or things like that. It's hard to tell when you see it on Twitter how true it is, but yeah, like I think that, and especially, I mean, this kind of ties into what the other topic, Bill C19, but like they really need to get these IT issues sorted before they start going for hyper specific draws.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm trying to make. You see, in January they did issue 11,000 invitations, so they had
Yeah.
two back-to-back draws of 5,500 each, and again then they went silent. So that could only mean a couple of things: that either they did not really sort out their IT issues, they did conduct these draws thinking they did sort it out, and again something crept up. They did go ahead and do the PNP draw anyway because, as you said, they are obligated to do so because of their provincial agreement. And then out of the blue, draw number 240 on the 2nd of February, they conducted a draw with the 3,300 for federal skilled worker. I mean, that basically, that got me into a thinking, absolutely put a thinking cap on, but I could not come back with any kind of reasonable understanding or logic why they would do an FSW draw. Didn't make any sense whatsoever, because even if it was an FSW draw, CEC candidates were being invited because they were meeting both the program criteria. And again, they went quiet. Feb 15th was a PNP draw. March 1, again, a PNP draw. So the point is, if they are facing IT issues, if they are facing technical glitches, then how are they still conducting PNP draws?
Whatever the IT issue they're having, this is all speculation, but whatever the IT issue they're having may just not affect PMP. Like some of them is very specific. Like when Express Entry first launched, there were very unique issues. Like if you had a certain combination of a CellPip score, for whatever reason, it recorded, I think, a 10 in one of the field or language abilities was being recorded as 0. Like there could just be something with CEC that is causing. I can't think of any other reason why they wouldn't do an all program draw or any CEC draw, given how critical draws in that category are for workers who are already here. And IT issues, it might seem like an excuse, but or like a bit of a theory, but for the fact that in November the department confirmed they were having IT issues. And in January, the department, to my knowledge, has not confirmed anything, but people on Twitter were reporting they should have been invited. Um, I do know people who sent me screenshots of their profile where they were getting points for things that they shouldn't have gotten.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, who knows, right? Like, we think back to 2021 September when the department stopped doing CEC draws.
Yeah.
Never announced it, right? It was only people noticed it, and then really it was that one memo that I tweeted that showed that this would likely last until July 2022, and it was a specific policy. So could there be some reason why they are not doing CEC draws for policy reasons? I don't know what it would be. Like the same set of circumstances from 2021 where there were huge PR programs that caused there to be too many applicants doesn't really exist right now. So I don't know why, like beyond technical issues that we know that they've been having, they wouldn't do application or a general draw or a CEC draw. Or for all we know, as soon as this call ends, there'll be a huge CEC draw.
But that wouldn't that be a welcome thought, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the welcome thing to happen. But on that note, I think that's a good suggestion for you to have another ATIP request for what is IRCC doing with all this money that has been allocated for their budgets, $85 million during COVID, and then 760 or $80 million for this technological advancements. Where's all the money going if they're still sticking to the system, which is so glitchy?
Yeah, they have to really improve all this by the time they launch Bill C19 comes into full effect. It's funny, I had tweeted this like years ago. We had former immigration minister Chris Alexander on the podcast, and we asked him like how stressful was the launch of Express Entry from an IT perspective, and he said it was unbelievably stressful that they would launch it and the whole thing would crash. which is sort of what happened in November after the change to the 2021 knock. Like, I would imagine these are complicated, getting all of these programs to work. And again, because it's not just an IT issue, because behind the IT issue is the law mandating certain decisions. They really have to like sort all this out, especially before they go to hyper specific draws under C19.
Yep. So basically, we can come to an agreement that there is no other conspiracy theories that is happening in IRCC control rooms, that they want to keep the scores above 500. They do not like people whose scores are below 500, and for whatever reason. But when we say CEC draws, and I'm just sort of just jumping off to a different one, and I know you have been a strong advocate that they should be CEC draw, and that actually people should be given permanent resident directly. But most of the applicants who are above the score of 500, as we have been seeing from since July onwards, don't you think most of them are CEC anyways?
Yeah, I think most are CEC, but there will always be a greater need for CEC because there's so many foreign workers who need to transition to permanent resident. I mean, my opinion is that there should never be an FSW draw until all the CECs are done.
You're not going to be a favorite amongst FSW.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying like for me, I don't even think CEC should be part of express entry, but that's a separate, that's a whole separate issue. And I actually think it's going to get worse with C19.
Because I am of the opinion that immigration to Canada is going to get much more difficult for people who are outside Canada. It's as they say, elementary, Dr. Watson, right? It's so logical. There are more than 1.2 million people in Canada who are temporary residents, and that's again data is from the open source on IRCC website. If you see each year the number of international students, then their spouses, then the people who are here on a temporary foreign worker program, and then now also they have spouses for NOC Cs and NOC Ds, or tier 4s and tier 5s. So it's so many people who are temporary residents in Canada. And of course, I would assume majority of them want to become permanent residents. There isn't enough immigration targets to make all of them permanent residents or transition them to permanent residents. So what's going to happen there? There's such imbalance between the permanent resident immigration targets as well as, or rather between them and the number of people who are temporary residents. How in the world is IRCC ever going to come up with a formula that's going to satisfy everybody's requirements?
They can't. It's the politicians need the political will to massively increase permanent resident targets. Like that's the issue. Is even up like I think this year is supposed to be 500,000 people will get permanent residence, and that includes like refugees being resettled, people from outside Canada, spouses. And I think this year over 1 million are going to enter as students and foreign workers. Yeah. Like the gap will just continue to grow between the people who can come and come temporarily and the people who we let stay permanently. And eventually, like before COVID, I was saying that it would be a couple of years before IRCC had to do something about this gap. Then there was a pandemic, which resulted in way less temporary residents arriving. The pandemic kind of let them kick the can down the road, but the gap is only going to widen, and I think only get worse because of C19.
C19 is becoming more of a nightmare for a lot of people. But let's talk about a bit.
Well, it shouldn't be anything yet. It's all we don't quite know. This was what in preparation for this, I went and read some of the committee meetings in Parliament when C19 was, which is C19 for those who don't know is just it was a budget bill, and in the budget bill, which covers off a lot, like there's amendments to legislation across the board, banking, fisheries, immigration, taxes, and the immigration provision was that they would be allowing category specific draws in express entry. And what people kind of latched onto and noticed was that they weren't saying occupation specific, they were saying category specific. And it's a little bit unclear as to what those categories will be, although the government kind of signaled where they were heading with the consultation that they did, which we can talk about.
All right. So while we are agreeing you and I basically, and I'm sure most of the people out there as well, that one of the reasons why express entry draws are not happening is because of the IT issues. Now, I have another theory that yes, the express entry draws are not happening because of the IT issues, but the IT issues that are holding back the draws now have more to do with the document, rather with the Bill C19 as well. Now, in this document, which was issued a few months back, I think in September by Sean Fraser, and this was in response to the that motion M44 which came out from Randeep Sarai, and this basically spoke about the 5 pillars. Now, in this document, I have to find where it says exactly, and I'm going to do it very, very quickly with you. And yes, this is where it says that. It says the implementation, and this is talking about the Bill C19, the implementation of these new authorities will require changes to the IRCC's IT system. And then in the red, it says the exact timing of the implementation for this measure has yet to be determined, and IRCC anticipates these changes to be in place by spring 2023. Now, obviously, spring is around the corner. Official date for spring is 20th of March. Now, in my opinion, absolutely opinion, speculation purely, I feel that whatever changes are being done to express entry system to incorporate the Bill C19 categories, that is what is creating those glitches, which is now holding them back from conducting these draws.
It definitely very well could be. Doesn't fully explain why they would do a federal skilled worker draw, but I do think that you're probably right that, I mean, they must be doing a lot of testing on the IT for category specific draws.
Because I can't think of any other reason. Okay, there are obviously been glitches forever. They came out and they did these 3 draws, 5,500, 5,500, and then a 3,300 draw, federal skilled worker. And then again, it went back to silent. Because when they conduct a PNP draw, they don't really have to do anything. Everybody who has the nomination, 600 plus, gets invited, end of the story, right? It's only everybody else who's in the express entry pool where the issues come up or crop up. And especially if they're trying to create those categories. Another thing with Bill C19, and that's now we get into the crux of the Bill C19, right? As you already clarified, Bill C19 was approved May or June last year, and so that immigration minister now has the authority under the law to create categories and choose high-ranking candidates within those categories from express entry. This is only within the express entry. Now, the categories were expected to be announced by February being 5th sitting day of the parliament after 31st of January. It didn't happen. Now, that is under the regs as well, 10.3.2, if I'm not mistaken. And that's what it says, that there should have been the categories that should have been announced to the parliament, but nothing happened. You have any idea what that might have been about?
Why there was a delay in announcing the categories?
Yeah.
I think they had to do, so what was the deadline supposed to be?
It's supposed to be, I'll just open that up, 5th sitting day of the parliament after 31st of January. So with that being in place...
I mean, it may have been pushed back by the consultations that they did, because the consultation period only ended January 16, 2023.
Yeah.
So, if they actually took the consultations seriously, I could see that getting pushed back a bit, what the categories would be. I don't know if they're going to actually even fully announce clearly at any given moment what the categories will be, or if they'll just be able to
this is where
it up as they go along.
So 10.5 subsection 1 says that the categories have to be, the stakeholders have to be involved in the categories, right? The unions, the employers, the workers, blah, blah, blah. And 10.5 subsection 3, here, this is where it says the minister shall cause to be tabled before each house of parliament not later than the 5th sitting day of the house after the 31st of January, following the end of each fiscal year, a report containing the list of the categories of eligible foreign nationals established in an instruction made under paragraph 10.31H1 and the selection criteria and the process applied for the establishment of these categories. This didn't happen.
Unless it's just supposed to be in the report to Parliament at the end of a year. Like, that might not actually be pertaining to this. Like, the 2023 stuff might. So that reads similar to the report to Parliament on immigration language, which is that in November 2022, they'll talk about immigration and what was done in 2021. So it's possible that actually just means that in
Oh,
the
you mean
report to
this would be
Parliament,
issued
yeah,
next
like
year?
this will be issued next year for what they did
Wow.
this year. That they have to
Wow.
report on what they did, not what they're going to be doing.
Oh my God, that
Yeah, that's
changes
how
everything.
that's how I read that.
No, but
It's
that
similar to the
changes.
language on the reports to Parliament on immigration that are always a year behind.
Unbelievable. But that changes everything. That basically means nobody will have any clue what are the categories.
No, and I think they're going to make them up a bit as they go along. So, like, I mean, they've said in their consultation document, they kind of hinted at what their categories are going to be. But let's say, like, you're a politician and you, like, through the use of these categories, they've created the ability to, like, basically invite whoever they want, right? Like, oh, there's strife in Iran right now. You know, you have through Bill C19 the ability for Justin Trudeau and the department to say, boom, anyone from Iran who's in the pool can immigrate. Anyone from Ukraine who's in the pool can immigrate. Oh, there's been bad stories about healthcare in the news and a shortage of doctors. Boom, we're inviting all doctors. Like, I think it's going to be a lot more reactive and allow for government press releases on how they're responding to political stories. That's my own, like, because that's what, like, if you were the minister, um, that would be a great use of the categories, right? You're able to respond to ongoing political issues, have a press release. You know, like, we don't know what the PR program for Ukrainians will be. Boom, this kind of, like, there we have one.
Wow.
Like, I
But
think it's going to be, and I actually think that's part of why I think it's going to be bad for CEC and bad for people in it, because I think I think there's the potential, but I think realistic potential that express entry is going to become a lot less predictable and more political.
wow. Because I mean, as I said, that changes everything in the sense like if you don't even know what the categories are going to be, how do you, as a practitioner, me as a practitioner, or all other 12,000 consultants and other lawyers, how do they consult? How do they give advice to their clients? How do you even tell anybody that you have a chance, you don't have a chance? You can go through this program, you can't go through this program. Where does it leave anybody? Where does it leave 240,000 people who are in the express entry pool? Should
Well, I think the pool will grow. Like, I think that pool, all the long haul truck drivers are still going to get into the pool, but I think you can advise them that, like, there will still be general draws. There will
yes,
also, you
they
can
have
kind of
confirmed.
look at the priorities that they identified in their consultations, which, you know, if you're a cynic like me, you think, okay, what their priorities were before the consultation probably did not change during the consultation. And that there would be occupation specific, or not occupation, there would be priority draws. But I don't even know, like, when I mean, you know, like, when you read some of the priorities that they list, I don't even know how you incorporate them into, like, how can we conduct categories from a diversity and anti-racism perspective? But I mean, the priorities that they listed were in these consults for the category. You know, I instinctively always say occupation specific, but category specific.
Yeah,
So addressing chronic labor market shortages and positioning for the future. I didn't. It's too bad I don't know how to, like, put this in the chat or something so you can show people what I'm reading.
sure, go
Uh,
ahead.
is there a chat here? Or?
Yeah, it says private chat on the
Oh,
right. You could just put that there, and I'll
for
just.
your viewers who haven't seen it, there's the link that the government has where this is a consultation for C19, and starting about halfway through, it lists about 2/3 of the way through, it gets into possible categories. Yeah, so it's archived because the consultation's done. The government doesn't want your thoughts anymore. But so if you just scroll down to the first possible category, once you get through all the preamble of, like, a history of express entry, and so priority possible category number 1, selecting categories based on a particular occupation or sector, which I think that, everyone kind of expected. I don't even know how this second possible category, transitioning international student graduates to permanent residents. So I guess if in Express Entry you click, and even there, if you break it down, it's even graduates in possible fields like STEM. It might not even be all international graduates, but there will be a category for transitioning international student graduates, a possible category for transitioning temporary foreign workers, basically the CEC. I don't know why that needs to be a category, but maybe they'll go, I don't know. I mean, even here they talk about, can we look at wages, I don't know how they would identify that. And then Francophone immigration.
Francophone immigration is something which I would like to talk to you about separately. But yes, but again, it brings me back to the same thing. How are they going to manage more than 1.2 million people with FHS target for this year being only 80 to 880?
Well, and there's one other thing from this consult that leapt out at me that I thought was really interesting, which is it says this year we're focused on meeting economic goals and priorities. And then it lists all the categories that I just talked about. And I noticed like this year, it's economic goals. In future years, who knows, right? Like that's where I think it could be, like the government last week announced all these measures for Iranians who are already here to help them get open work permits. It would be perfectly foreseeable that in addition to open work permits, they will say, boom, express entry draw just for people from Iran. And then the government, the minister can say, hey, in addition to these measures, the government is responding to what's going on in Iran. We've just invited all skilled workers, we've just invited 4,000 Iranians to apply for permanent residency through express entry. And then as you just hinted at, what's going to happen to these 1.2 million people? It's going to be difficult because it's going to be difficult for people who would have previously qualified for express entry. Like, I don't see how there will be a ITA below 480 or 490 if they're always doing a general CEC ITA or below 480 if they are going to start doing these hyper focus draws.
Okay. I mean, I'm basically speechless. I don't even know which way to go with this. Because first of all, the numbers are not adding up. There's so much of imbalance. And what you're saying about the political will being behind this whole thing, I absolutely agree with that, because this can be more politically motivated. But at the end of the day, they still need to meet their economic goal. They're still talking to the stakeholders also being a big lobby of certain industries, whether it is agri-industry, whether agro-industry, whether it's the construction. I mean, you know what's happening with the construction industry. In Ontario, they have this program where out-of-status construction workers have an avenue, a pathway.
Yeah, not in-status construction workers, just out-of-status construction workers. Very silly of those people to get work permits. Very silly.
Okay, because now you're also encouraging people to do that, right? I mean, yeah. And then all the talk about them trying to sort of look at ways of giving some provisions to people who are already out of status in Canada, giving them some sort of an amnesty. So the point comes, I mean, again, let's completely cut off all this talk and come to the right to the bottom of it. What happens to people who are planning or who have invested so much of money, so much of time, so much of effort, especially CECs, and not to also mention FSWs, but also them, because just to score CLB 9, CLB 10 in English, just to get their scores up there, it has taken them a lot of effort. I mean, even if you do speak English very well, to score in an examination can take you some time and effort. Of course, money we're not even talking about the money. And for CECs, for people who have planned their journeys 2 years, 3 years, 4 years back, they came to Canada, they wanted to study. Mm-hmm. Let's accept it, right? Nobody comes to Canada to study, or rather, okay, let me rephrase that. Most of the people who come to Canada to study are not coming here to study because of the quality of education. They're coming here because it's a proven pathway for permanent residence. Now, this was instilled through every advertising campaign by colleges, by institutions, even by the government, even by IRCC. In some way or the other, it was always insinuated what happens to people who have bought into these campaigns, these things or whatever government had tried to sell them, or the colleges have tried to sell them. They bought into it. They've spent all this money, thousands and thousands of dollars, for education which they did not need or didn't want in the first place. Then they have spent their time and effort in working and creating, or rather gaining, the Canadian work experience. And now at the end of the road, it's government telling them, we have changed our mind, we're going to go this way. We might not even invite you at all.
I mean, unless there's another pandemic that reduces the temporary numbers, they'll need to deal with this issue, because it's going to be, it's going to grow and grow, this gap between the number of people who are living and working here temporarily, who can't even buy a house now, and those who can stay permanently. And I really don't know, because I would think it's been interesting watching the news in Canada, because the increase in the number of permanent residents that are being admitted is coinciding with a huge housing shortage. And what's been noticeable in the media is that the response from stakeholders who are normally consistently pro increasing immigration numbers is, where are we going to house all these new people? So I don't actually know where it goes. I used to think that they would just increase numbers, but because of all the politics around housing right now, I don't know how much appetite there is politically to try to increase numbers. Yeah, and someone just posted in the chat, you should also talk about high house prices, right? So that's kind of what I just started doing, which is that's kind of the big question now, is will there be the political ability to continue to increase numbers without housing being built? And if there's not, then this imbalance is only going to increase and increase. Or, I don't know how true this is, you might know more than I do, is the housing prices becoming a factor in, students wanting to come here, or people, say, from India wanting to come here. My practice is much more like judicial review. I don't have all the conversations. I see you do videos about, how to actually thrive in Canada in addition to immigrating here. Are you hearing more and more that Canada is a less attractive destination because current international students are reporting back it's really expensive here, and kind of, it's not what we thought.
Yeah, no, the problem is people, regardless of, if I make a video and tell people, listen, don't come to Canada because the housing is expensive, it's everything is expensive, people are not going to buy into that narrative. They're just going to tell me that you did not know how to manage your finances better. We're going to figure out a better way of doing it.
Yeah,
it's a known fact. My son, my second son, he's an international student. He is living in Gulf. And when he started his journey, even he was, I left him out. You got to manage your own funds, finances. He was sharing his house with X number of students. I don't want to go into the details of that, but what I'm saying is, and on some days it could get quite difficult. So with a lot of these international students, it's no longer only about finances. It's also about their mental health, mental well-being. They're under so much of pressure now. It's a known fact. Most of them are not financially well off. They or their parents may have taken loans. They may have sort of arranged finances to come to Canada. Then they arrive here with the expectation that they will find a part-time job, which will then help them manage their expenses. Then they realize that whatever they are earning is not adding up in terms of the numbers as to what they have to pay per month for their expenses. And very soon the pressure starts building up. They're doing 2 jobs, 3 jobs sometimes, and even shunning away or sort of not even going for their courses or their colleges or their schools, just in order to meet or manage their expenses. But the point again comes back to the same thing. After having done all of this and yet not getting through the whole process. But is it shunning away the people from, or rather scaring people away from not coming to Canada? No. Canada, at least India is still the number 1 source country for newcomers to Canada, whether it's the immigrants or whether it's the international students. As per the last data, US was where the most of the international Indian students went, but Canada was very close number 2. I think the variance was only a few thousand. And there is so much of pressure. For example, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but for a state of Punjab in India, almost one member of almost every single family is either in Canada or in UK,
Yeah.
and it's already, you know, like a stigma that if you are not in Canada, then you basically have low self-esteem. Therefore, the amount of pressure, if you ever were to go to Punjab, the number of education consultants and the number of IELTS centers over there, I mean, sometimes I feel with this number of IELTS centers, we should be able to teach the world English. I mean, we should have that many number of people out there. But there's so much of pressure on people, on students to come to Canada. People apply once, twice, thrice, four times, five times, six. I know of one person who has applied 18 times for for student visa, for study visa,
Wow.
yet got refused, yet wants to try again. I mean, like,
So
and
the
if you're
demand
saying,
will always be there. So I don't know where it will.
so yeah,
And
if
then at the
somebody
same
said the
time, you have
housing
the United
prices,
States busing refugees to the Canada-US border, which will also, like, you know, in theory, if, and I hate making it seem like I'm playing different categories off each other, but in theory, if the target is 500,000 and the number of people crossing from the United States into Canada illegally or at an unofficial crossing to claim asylum goes from, say, 10,000 to 45,000, which I think was last year's number, then in theory, that's 35,000 less people that can be admitted through other categories.
true.
So the pressures on express entry and, like, call it regular immigration, like the general all applicant draws and express entry, just seems like it's going to go up and up. Especially, I mean, I've talked about this as well with you, like the number of Ukrainians that are on their way.
Yeah, yeah. We'll be
Massive.
talking about this.
Like, just massive. Like, what are the current?
I
It's
think about 300,000 or 400,000 people already that they issued the work permits for. And I know we have discussed about this earlier as well as to what's going to happen with these people. I know Sean Fraser
yeah.
has very categorically stated that they're not looking at any permanent residence pathway program directly
Oh,
because,
they're like, I mean, that can get kicked to 2025 when these work permits expire. But I'm just
yeah,
looking at, like, so far about 170,000 Ukrainians have arrived.
yeah.
592,000 have been approved.
Wow.
So
I thought
there's another,
400,000,
you know, that's like,
592.
yeah, 400,000 still to come, 903,000 applications received, and the government's just
Whoa.
backlogged. You can assume they'll all be approved. Like, the
Yes.
numbers there that are on their way, I would think are on their way, unless they cancel them all if and when the war ends. I like the pressures in the upcoming years between Bill C19, asylum claimants, the Ukrainians. It's gonna just be massive. Like, I don't know. I think it's gonna be difficult.
You know, until now, I never calculated this number in the 1.2 million temporary residents in Canada. And just to come to think about it, this never occurred to me. But yes, that number now is no longer 1.2 million. It's going to be much,
Yeah.
much, much bigger. So the imbalance continues to grow.
Yeah.
Now, that
And the
brings me to another.
political pressure that those Ukrainians, I mean, right now they would probably, a lot of them would qualify as like refugees given the current war in Ukraine. But like, there's I don't see the politics of 900 of hundreds of thousands of people having to return, all from, like, who were brought here on humanitarian needs, especially given the uncertainty of how the war will end. Like, I don't see how there's not specific programs for them or express entry draw. I mean, but that's the thing, right? That we were talking about, like the politics of it. One way to churn through and like reduce, like help those people stay is Ukraine specific express entry draws.
Again, another question that says, will C19 be region based? And this then brings up to this ties up with the whole thing, right? If there is a political agenda there,
Yeah.
then they could very well make categories which are, indicating certain countries, certain nationalities, primarily to sort of look after the humanitarian crisis, for example, Ukraine.
Yeah, I think for sure there'll be eventual regional targets. I mean, there already is. I don't actually really know what those regions would. I mean, this also, like, does it make sense to have or a northern region program when you can just do that through express entry and just do targets based on region?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't actually like the specifics of that. Because what is express entry capture? I guess city, and I guess you could do it by. That's the thing. I don't know how they would do it if like they organized by city, by province. Like I don't think there'll be a province only draw. And it seems like it would be a nightmare to try to do city only draws. Although there, in theory, is supposed to be a municipal nominee program coming up. So like,
I don't understand the significance of creating another program, which is a municipal nominee program, because at the end of the day, the whole criteria is to get a job offer, and then, I mean, they could have so much, they could do so much better with the way they're creating these programs. Look at the RNIP. Now, RNIP is become a complex program. There is no standard program across different communities. Each
yeah,
community has their own set of criterias. So sometimes when you have a client who's trying to consult with you, is figure out which community. Say, hold on a minute, I got to go through the each community criteria to tell you what's happening. Same
yeah.
thing's going to happen with municipal nominee program. And here's another comment. No, not this one. Sorry, there was yeah. I'm not leaving. Don't care if I lose status. I didn't devote 8 years of my life to be kicked out at the end. My score is 507. Now look at this. And this is exactly what we've been talking about, right? There are so many people in Canada who have spent so much time,
Yep.
so much effort, so much of money, and what's going to happen at the end?
Yeah, they'll be interesting. Like in the like I guess the fallback would be humanitarian and compassionate class applications. And I was actually in federal court at a hearing 2 weeks ago, and there's an interesting unresolved issue in the law, and we obviously argued the side favorable to our client, but with parents and grandparents who come here on super visas and then apply for permanent residency on humanitarian and compassionate grounds.
Yeah.
There's some of the officers will say, well, there's the parent and grandparent program. And there's this split in the jurisprudence as to whether it's reasonable for officers to even consider that an alternative because it's a lottery.
Yeah.
So if express entry becomes increasingly out of reach based on points calculations and unpredictability, it will be interesting to see over the years, depending in part on how the parent and grandparent program, the federal court ultimately decides on this, whether H&C becomes easier because alternate ways to immigrate become so much more difficult. Because eventually, like if foreign workers can never immigrate, the strength of an H&C application will just get stronger each year that they're here.
I can only foresee two things coming up from from the discussion that we are having. First one is a massive humanitarian crisis in Canada itself because of this imbalance that the government is themselves creating. If they are already aware that they will not be able to handle these many temporary residents, then they should put a block on the international student visas itself. Do not give out anymore. Do not fall prey to the college or the institution who are obviously, it's a $26 billion industry at the end of the day. So again, there is a political agenda there. But if they do not put a break on it right now, couple of years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, you cannot even imagine the kind of crisis they would be having at hand at that point of time. And number two, with all these people who are, as I said, humanitarian crisis, you will, and 1.2 million plus another few 100,000 Ukrainian work permit holders, if they will not find a route to become a pathway to become permanent residents, you're only going to encourage more and more and more people to go out of status and continue being in Canada till somebody catches up to them.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, I don't know how much. So the counter argument, there certainly is, like, I can see where it's a humanitarian nightmare of people having to leave. The counter argument that IRCC would probably make is that each of those people at every step of the way
said they would
when
go
they
back.
came here said they would go back.
Yes.
So really, like, what's the problem, right? Like every student seems to have, in their study permit, a plan as to how that degree will help them in their home country. And when they applied to be a postgraduate work permit, they had to show in theory that they would, they understood that it was temporary and it would leave. So if all the international students, like, is it a humanitarian crisis or is it just, well, now you get to fulfill your plan, right? Like, I can see both. I can see both arguments. Like,
No, I can understand the argument, all right?
yeah,
And the reason people say all these things in their study plans that or study permit that they will go back because they have XYZ plans to fulfill is because that's what IRCC wants to hear.
yeah.
Would IRCC accept from any international student who will say, listen, I want to come to Canada because this is a pathway for permanent resident? Of course not. IRCC will
Yeah.
refuse that application right away,
No,
right?
like, yeah. So it's the two of like, you know, and the fact that like once someone's here for 8 years, but yeah, it's that's just the counter argument that I could see IRCC making, especially because like the humanitarian crisis in the possible world that I'm envisioning would be, from a media standpoint, offset by, hey, we're letting all these Ukrainians stay. Hey, we're letting all these Iranians stay. Hey, this group gets to stay. Hey, and so like the general plight of the broader, you know, the broader group would kind of get subsumed by the constant press releases of this group just got invited. We're doing this. Like, so yeah, like I think it's going to be tricky. I'm curious to say, and I think H&C applications are, if this world does wind up where it just like, you know, the points go higher and higher, the outlet would have to be humanitarian and compassionate grounds, or that massive increase in numbers. But as somebody else, like, you know, talked about in the comments, is there the political will with housing where it's at?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know where it's a very uncertain,
But impacts Canadians directly, right? And this is where the vote bank is. If the Canadians start getting frustrated or angry with the housing, I mean, not that they not already are, with the housing prices, and somehow somebody sort of tries to link it directly with the number of increasing immigration, then you can see a lot of anti-immigration sentiment coming through, which is also then going to reflect directly onto the vote bank, and from there on again to the political agenda.
Yeah. So I don't know, like, I don't, it's just what I like. It's just interesting to notice that, you know, the housing, it seemed in the media more than in the past that housing was tied to immigration. And I don't know how that will impact political will. Now, the Conservatives so far have seemed pretty pro-immigrant, so at least there would be, it seems, political consensus. But how that actually pans out, I have no idea.
Okay, just to wind our today's discussion, just the last one here. What are the chances and hope for Francophone candidates or bilingual? Now, just to sort of bring that into perspective, let me.
Hi.
Here. Well, I think it was in this link. I'm going to post this link in the description after we end the video. And here on this one, it says one of the possible categories is selecting Francophone and bilingual candidates. Francophone immigration is quite high on the political agendas with IRCC. There has been year-on-year increase on trying to increase the number of Francophones into different parts of country except Quebec. So I would say that anybody who's looking to defend themselves against all these issues and the Bill C19 categories, etc., then French would possibly be a great opportunity to get into.
Yeah. Well, you also get unlimited 3-year work permits for any skilled position without the need for an
mobility program. Yes.
Like, your odds, if you speak French, go way up.
Yeah. So that's for people who are not aware of the Francophone International Mobility Program, whereby if you have a job offer, LMIA exempt, and if you're a Francophone, you can prove your language or linguistic abilities in French, then you can apply for a work permit without having an LMIA.
Yeah, and after a year, you get 50 points as well on express entry.
Yes, you would. So if you didn't know that, then now you know that. And if you're
pretty sure you know the OIMP better than me, but doesn't the OIMP have a program that also targets?
Yes, they have a French speakers stream, but they have also started conducting a targeted occupation draw within that stream as well. So that really sort of defeats the purpose. Because if they're going to only identify X number of NOC codes, what about the others who are not within that occupation? So, but then on that note, and this is the last one, I know we're running short of time, but if Bill C19 is going to be category based and majority of the categories are going to be occupation based, then how do they differentiate it from the PNP programs? because that's pretty much the same thing, right? So then my theory or my
Yeah.
opinion is that PNPs would go back to the drawing board and start redesigning their program or realigning their program so that they can still attract people into their provinces.
I mean, that's been like an ongoing, like it's like everyone targets tech right now, and it's, do we need do we need all the programs to target the exact same people? Yeah, I don't know if they do category specific. I mean, Global Talent Stream is tech focused. I hope they don't all just target the same individuals. Like, from a political, standpoint, I get it, because everyone likes to, say they're targeting STEM and this and that. Yeah, I really don't.
What I'm saying, the question is, how would the PNP programs be any different than the Bill C19 category draws? Because PNP draws, most of them are also category-based draws.
Well, it would be, I don't know, different. They'd look at different occupations. So it's actually like, I mean, OIMP I know is very occupation specific. British Columbia's isn't. British Columbia is tech, like it's lower ITA threshold for tech, and there's a healthcare, and but that's the thing. Like, so BC is the occupations that they target. I could see them targeting, like, I don't know in Ontario, like, so BC has early childhood educator
And
is like
healthcare
the
workers.
bigs, and healthcare workers are the big two.
And the tech, of
Different
course.
programs. Would the federal government think to target early childhood educators? There could still be regional
But
focuses.
then you see, Alberta does occupation specific. I mean, they don't announce the occupations, but they do an occupation specific. Saskatchewan does an occupation specific. Nova Scotia, as and when they ever do the draws, then they do it occupation specific. Ontario, of course, all their programs have now become occupation specific. That hardly leaves anybody.
Well, I mean, that's already a bit of an issue where someone will get a CEC, someone in the pool with like 500 points right now. It's a waste of a provincial nominee historically, but you could still get the provincial nomination. I mean, it's not great. It's annoying when everyone seems to target the same people. I would imagine that's going to happen if categories are indeed very occupation specific. I suspect eventually it'll be more country specific and policy based.
Okay.
I also think it's going to, I really think it's going to be reactive to, this time it's this country. Oh, there's a healthcare shortage, so we're doing this. Like, I think it'd be a politician's dream to have an immigration system that is that responsive to whatever the because like the reason why this hasn't happened before, like if you like the history behind it sort of was that, in 2021, they did the TRPR because they thought that they had no one left in Canada after their big CEC draw. And that really screwed up express entry, right? Like more people applied than they had to stop draws. But if you could do TRPR and political little goals within express entry and always manage intake, you could design a system where the minister has the ability to always be politically popular in press releases while controlling intake. Like, I can't see why they wouldn't do that if they had the ability. Right? Like if you're the minister and you're like, hey, what can we do to help people from Ukraine or Iran? And they're like, well, I mean, you could invite 4,000 of them through express entry and it wouldn't impact our ability to meet processing standards because you control intake. I don't see why the minister wouldn't always be like, absolutely. Like, yeah.
No, I agree. One quick comment here: future of immigration is so depressing. I absolutely agree with you on that one. And Stephen,
Remember, I mean, the target, like, I mean, it seems depressing now. In 2022, the numbers were half what they are now. Like, it's depressing in that it's unpredictable. I think the system is sorting itself out, but like, it's depressing in that it's unpredictable. But more people are going to be able to come. I mean, that's the kind of the thing. Like, it's this weird thing where more people are able to come than ever before and become permanent residents than ever before, at least in absolute numbers. But it also feels so much more restrictive
It's more uncertain. It's more competitive. And then Marzonia says, are you saying that regular express entry draws will happen alongside those category-based draws? Yes, that is what IRCC has indicated in their document. The link, I will post it later on after the video. And IRCC did state that they would continue with the regular draws that they're conducting alongside simultaneously with the category.
Just the points threshold will probably be higher.
Obviously, because the number of invitations are going to be low. Okay, I know we can go on and on and on.
Yeah,
These discussions can be so interesting. You know, you're such a hard man to catch, Stephen, and I wish you had a bit more time for us on your calendar so we could squeeze you in every 3 months, if not sooner than that. But thank you so much. Thank you for joining in once again and sharing.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always fun to I really like this. It's always fun to talk.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate it, Stephen. I hope to see you again very soon.
Definitely, and come to Ottawa.
Yes, of course, we'll catch up in Ottawa for sure. Well, that was Stephen, and I thank him so much for being part of today's discussion. Guys, I know today's discussion has been a bit on the depressing side of things, but at the end of the day, what is more important, and I know I stay forever hopeful, and I'll show you that as well, because at the end of the day, and I keep this here with me, you know, and so that this is a constant reminder that I got to be forever hopeful. This stays with me in my office. And the more important factor here is that we always need to, accept the reality the way things are. And the sooner we understand how things are playing out, the better we would be in a position to leverage whatever lies in front of us. So as we discussed today, a lot of things are uncertain. And I know Stephen is on the sidelines, and this was one more thing I wanted to tell Stephen and also Degree, that I just hope and wish somebody from IRCC someday watches one of our videos and says, and the last or the only thing, if I could request from IRCC, would be to have a bit more transparency, a bit more clarity, and be a bit more communicative. So just come out with some communication, tell people what's happening, what you're thinking, what you're planning. At least people's nerves would be a bit more settled rather than flared up right now the way things are. If there is no draw happening, well, then just come out and say there is no draw happening. At least, you'll not be speculating and losing our sleep over it. If you're going to conduct a draw 2 months later, then just let people know the draw will be happening after 2 months for this and that reason. That's it. Small statement, 2 lines. That's all that we need. But sometimes that is wishful thinking. Probably I'll put that on my Christmas tree this time. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining in. It was lovely catching up with Stephen again, and we will do this again next time soon. Until such time, put your comments below, put your questions below. Maybe Stephen can come back and respond to some of them. I'll come back and respond to some of them. But I shall see you next time. Stay safe. Take care. Stay forever hopeful.